This is a quiet story, told slowly. There's nothing you need to do, and nothing you need to remember. You can listen closely, or let the words fade into the background as you rest. The story will move gently, without sudden moments, and it will stay with you whether you're awake or drifting off. Tonight's story is The Night the Stars Felt Close. The house was quiet in the way that followed a day without incident. No unfinished conversations lingered in the rooms. No tasks pressed against the edges of thought. The lights were low, placed where they were needed and nowhere else, and the air carried the settled calm of something that had been allowed to end naturally. Owen Blake stood near the back door and listened. Inside, sound had reduced itself to the bare minimum. A faint hum from the refrigerator, the soft tick of pipes cooling after use, the subtle shift of wood responding to night air. Each sound arrived without urgency, existing only long enough to be noticed before returning to the background. Nothing asked for attention. Sleep had not arrived yet. He did not resist that. Over time, Owen had learned that sleep did not benefit from pursuit. When it came easily, he accepted it. When it hesitated, he waited without irritation. Waiting, he discovered, often led somewhere gentler than effort ever had. He reached for the handle and opened the door. The night air met him quietly, cool but not sharp, carrying the clean scent of grass and distant moisture. The garden lay dark and composed, its shapes familiar even without light to define them fully. Owen stepped out and closed the door behind him with care, not wanting to disturb the balance that had settled inside the house. Above him, the sky opened without boundary. Stars scattered across it in quiet abundance, more visible here than they ever were closer to town. They had always been there, waiting for darkness to make space for them. The absence of streetlight allowed them to hold their presence without competition, steady and uninsistent. Owen tilted his head back and breathed out slowly. He stood like that for a while, hands resting loosely at his sides, breath moving in a rhythm that felt unforced. The day he had left behind had been ordinary in the best sense of the word. Work completed without difficulty. Conversations that resolved themselves without lingering weight. Meals eaten without distraction or hurry. There was no clear reason he could name for the restlessness that had delayed sleep, and the absence of reason did not trouble him. Not everything announced itself with clarity. Some things arrived as a quiet misalignment, a sense that the body needed something slightly different from what the mind had planned. He had learned to listen for that over the years, even when it did not come with explanation. The grass beneath his feet felt cool through the soles of his shoes. Moisture clung lightly to the blades, brushing against the edges of leather as he shifted his weight. The physical sensation grounded him, reminding him of scale and presence. A low fence marked the boundary at the far edge, its outline barely visible in the dark. Beyond it, the land fell away into shadow, unlit and unconcerned. A tree near the corner lifted its branches toward the sky, leaves still, as though listening. Owen looked up again. The stars seemed closer tonight. He understood, intellectually, that nothing had changed. Distance did not contract because a person noticed it. The measurable facts of space remained exactly as they had been before he stepped outside. Still, the impression remained. The sky felt nearer, less remote, as though the space between observer and observed had thinned just enough to be felt. The feeling was not wonder, in the dramatic sense. It did not arrive with awe or revelation. It was quieter than that. A sense of proximity, of being included rather than excluded. He noticed how his shoulders had dropped without instruction. The tension he carried so often during the day had loosened, not because it had been addressed directly, but because it no longer needed to be held. A sound moved somewhere beyond the garden, not close enough to identify clearly. Perhaps a fox moving through undergrowth. Perhaps the distant passage of a car along an unlit road. The sound did not intrude. It passed through the quiet without breaking it. Owen moved toward the chair at the edge of the garden. He had placed it there earlier in the evening, drawn by the habit of sitting outside when the air felt like this, and sat down carefully. The chair was firm, its surface cold enough to register immediately. He welcomed both sensations. Comfort, he had learned, did not always require softness. Sometimes it came from certainty, from knowing where the body ended and the world began. From this position, the house receded behind him. In front of him, the garden stretched out, then dissolved into open sky. Owen rested his head lightly against the back of the chair and allowed his gaze to drift. Thoughts moved through him slowly, unstructured and light. A fragment of a conversation from earlier in the week. The memory of sunlight resting on a wall in the late afternoon. The quiet satisfaction of finishing something without fuss or recognition. None of it demanded holding. A plane crossed far overhead, its light a brief, quiet line that moved steadily before disappearing into the dark. The sound arrived a moment later, faint and contained, then passed. The stars remained, unchanged by the interruption. The air cooled slightly. The change registered not as discomfort, but as information. Time continued to move forward, even when he remained still. Owen felt small in a way that steadied him, not diminished, not erased, simply placed within something larger that did not require his participation to continue. The stars did not offer answers. They offered perspective. The difference mattered. A memory came of a night years ago when sleep had refused him for sharper reasons. A period when silence felt heavy, when space pressed inward rather than opening out. Those nights had taught him the difference between loneliness and quiet. This night belonged firmly to the latter. The quiet carried no expectation. It did not ask him to resolve anything. It allowed him to be present without performance, a state that had once felt unfamiliar and now felt earned through repetition. Owen noticed the way his hands rested, fingers loose, palms open. He had not decided to relax them. The body had done that on its own. Some stars were faint, almost lost to the edge of vision. Others stood clear and steady. The variation did not imply hierarchy. Presence here did not depend on prominence. Everything that could be seen belonged equally to the whole. He closed his eyes briefly. Darkness deepened behind his lids, but the sense of space remained. The stars did not vanish when unseen. The knowledge of them persisted, quiet and reassuring. He opened his eyes again without urgency, returning to the open sky. The night felt generous, not because it gave him anything new, but because it allowed him to set something down. The weight he had carried earlier, unremarked and undefined, had eased. It had not disappeared. It had simply found a place where it no longer needed to be held. Owen breathed in and out, slow and even. The moment did not peak. It did not build toward revelation. It remained steady, like a tide, that had reached a comfortable height and decided to stay there for a while. He understood, without framing it as insight, that this was enough. Not every experience needed to be memorable, to be meaningful. Not every night needed to change something to be worth stepping into. Sometimes the value lay in alignment, in the brief sense that the body, the mind, and the world were moving at compatible speeds. The night shifted in stages so small they would have been easy to miss. The air cooled another degree. The ground beneath a chair released the last of the warmth it had gathered during the day. Somewhere beyond the garden, a sound changed pitch, signaling distance rather than presence. The moment did not feel as though it was slipping away. It felt as though it were completing itself. Owen stood. The movement was smooth, unhurried. He placed the chair back where it belonged, aligning it carefully. Some habits remained even in moments of stillness. He stood a moment longer, letting his gaze move across the garden one final time. The tree's outline blended into the sky. The fence marked its boundary without emphasis. Moisture clung to metal and leaves, catching faint reflections that disappeared as soon as they were noticed. The night had given what it could. Owen turned toward the house and walked back across the grass, his steps measured and calm. He paused at the door, hand on the handle, not because he was reluctant to go inside, but because the transition felt worth acknowledging. Inside, the air was warmer immediately. The house received him without adjustment. The quiet he had left remained intact, as though it had been waiting rather than absent. He moved through the rooms without turning on additional lights, guided by familiarity rather than sight. He prepared for bed with the same ease, shoes set aside, hands washed. The small rituals that signaled rest unfolded without thought. None of them felt like conclusion. They felt like continuation. When Owen lay down, he did not try to hold the night with him. The sense of closeness had already done its work. It did not need to be preserved or repeated. It had settled into him quietly, not as memory, but as alignment. The body recognized that and responded. Sleep arrived without resistance. Outside, the night continued its slow transition. The stars remained where they were, steady and unremarkable in their distance. The horizon lightened by degrees too small to name. The garden released its hold on darkness and accepted the coming day without ceremony. Morning would arrive soon enough. For now, the night completed itself gently, leaving no demand behind. Only the quiet assurance that being present had been enough. The stars did not need to feel close again. It was enough to know they had been there when he looked. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like, comment, share and subscribe. Thank you for supporting the channel.